Good evening. It's Friday, the 22nd of May. I'm Erin Viner, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. U.S. President Barack Obama is defending his scathing criticism of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu by arguing that his disagreements with the Israeli leader lend him credibility when he defends the Jewish state in the international arena. During a wide-ranging interview with journalist Jeffrey Goldberg in The Atlantic, Obama said that his denouncing of Netanyahu's Election Day warning that Arab citizens were streaming to the polls in droves was warranted because it violated the very language of Israel's own Declaration of Independence and was also related to the very nature of the two nations' honest relationship. He added that Netanyahu's comments have foreign policy consequences, as did his apparent backtracking of support for a two-state solution during his recent campaign. Although Obama acknowledged that the emergence of a more overt and dangerous anti-Semitism would make people fearful, he said that that does not mean there should be unconditional support for Israel when one disagrees with its policies. And Goldberg asked if the fact that the Iranian regime is anti-Semitic shouldn't preclude a negotiating strategy that treats the Islamic Republic as a rational player. Obama replied that Iran's survival instinct is more powerful than its other calculations, including its hatred of Jews and imperialistic aspirations. More than 800 regional leaders are today attending the World Economic Forum on the Middle East and North Africa that opened on the Jordanian side of the Dead Sea. In his remarks to those assembled, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas claimed Israel is standing in the way of a peace deal by continuing to expand settlements and in perpetuating the occupation. Abbas insisted that the Palestinians are committed to a two-state solution to the conflict and blamed Israel for the lack of progress in achieving that goal. He made no mention of the new Netanyahu government or potential implementation of new policy that development may bring. And during his own address to the government, business and civil society leaders who are attending the two-day economic conference, Jordan's King Abdullah said that he welcomes international support in solving area problems and that the violence that threatens so many in the region are part of a global assault on peace, law, democracy, and coexistence. Many of the leading experts in the fields of energy, infrastructure, and healthcare are among those gathered, including former Israeli President Shimon Peres, who said that most Israelis still favor a two-state solution. Meanwhile, it appears that one of the loose ends remaining from Netanyahu's formation of the government may be tied up. Likud sources say that party number 2, Gilad Erdan, may join the cabinet next week after he and the prime minister succeeded in overcoming disagreement during the coalition-forming process. It has been reported that Erdogan will now be given the bolstered public security portfolio that he has been seeking, and that Tourism Minister Yariv Levin, who had also been appointed to the Public Security Ministry at the last moment, has now been informed by officials in the Prime Minister's office that he will have to relinquish his second portfolio to Erdogan. Netanyahu made apparent efforts to mend relations with the nation's Arab sector during yesterday's meeting with the chairman of the Joint Arab List, Ayman Odeh. Netanyahu created an uproar with his polarizing Election Day warning that his continuing right-wing rule was at risk because Arab voters were being mobilized in droves to the ballot boxes. After the talks with Odeh, which were the first since his re-election, Netanyahu said that he stressed the need to continue reducing the gaps in Israeli society and that he proposed a regular dialogue between a government team of relevant ministers and Arab MKs to formulate plans for increasing government investment in the Israeli Arab community. Odeh described the meeting as not simple. He said that he told Netanyahu that it is unacceptable for a prime minister to speak against citizens voting and denounced his statements as a despicable election tactic. New Deputy Foreign Minister Tzipi Hotovely delivered a fiery message to the international community during an official reception yesterday when she said that Israel owes no apologies for its policies. In her address, Hotovely said that too many efforts are being made to appease the world and that Israelis should stand up for themselves. She went on to declare that this land is ours, all of it is ours, and we did not come here to apologize for that. During her speech, Hotovely cited biblical commentary, including God's promise that the land of Israel would go to the Jews. Hotovely also insisted that, as a matter of principle, the government has the right to build in all areas of Israel.
We expect the international community to back up the demand of our Prime Minister to declare on Israel as the Jewish national state. And moreover, we expect, as a matter of principle, that the international community recognize Israel's right to build homes for Jews in their homeland everywhere. I thank you, and I'm wishing you all Chag Shavuot Sameach and good luck.
Joining me now here in the studio to discuss the latest political and diplomatic events is senior correspondent for Bloomberg Israel, Kalev Ben-David. Hi, Kalev. Thanks for coming in.
Pleasure to be here, Erin, as always.
Now, this week, of course, we saw the beginning of Netanyahu's fourth administration finally getting down to work after a really lengthy coalition-building process. What kind of a policy can we expect this government to pursue? Well,
that's a good question, because judging from its first week, it really doesn't know what kind of policies it wants to pursue. I mean, this has been a rough week, inaugural week for the Netanyahu government. You had this whole incident where the defense minister, Moshe Ya'alon, instituted this plan to limit Palestinian travel on buses in the West Bank, but he doesn't seem to have notified apparently the prime minister, because the next day, Prime Minister Netanyahu reversed the decision. Foreign ministry didn't know about it. The deputy defense minister apparently didn't know the decision had been reversed. There was no kind of public announcement. I mean, this is what in Israel we call a real fashla, and it seems like different parts of the government were not talking to each other. We had another incident where Prime Minister Netanyahu suddenly dismissed the Director General of the Communications Ministry. Remember, he's taken on the Communications Ministry himself for the time being. And this Director General had been spearheading exactly the kind of reforms, particularly regarding Bezek and the broadband in Israel, that the Prime Minister has said that he wants to pursue during the coming months or perhaps years. Right now, the government looks kind of confused about what it's trying to accomplish, and I think they're going to have to really work out some kinks.
So what comes next for the peace process? I mean, this week we also saw the visit of European Union Foreign Ministry Chief Federica Mogherini, at which time Netanyahu restated his commitment to the two-state process, the two-state solution. What can we expect to come next?
I think, unfortunately, again here, I think what we can expect to come next is just more continued conflict in the diplomatic arena between Israel and the Palestinian and its supporters. First of all, you heard deputy minister Tzipi Hotovely from the Likud, Netanyahu's own Likud party, basically rejecting any of the tenets that can move the peace process forward. You have the Palestinians more and more going to unilateral steps, diplomatic steps. For example, this week trying to get Israel suspended from the World Soccer body, FIFA. So we've only heard really more, I guess, aggressive words from both, certainly from President Mahmoud Abbas and from some members of the Israeli government. And plus, we're hearing rumblings now, for example, in Europe, the French apparently trying to introduce a new peace plan, which is basically going to pose a deadline on Israel to make concessions toward the Palestinians in the coming year. And this is not going to be acceptable to the Netanyahu government. So I would say right now what we're going to see is just more continued, certainly not advancement in any kind of advancement in negotiations, but more jockeying in the diplomatic arena between Israel and the Palestinians.
Now, of course, in the diplomatic arena, part of the reason I think that the French are moving in, plus the European Union, is there's somewhat of a vacuum that the Americans used to fill. What do you make of Obama's interview with Jeffrey Goldberg in The Atlantic? Do you think that Netanyahu and Obama will ever come to a point where they can actually have a working relationship?
Well, judging by President Obama's comments, I think my answer has to be no.
That's it?
Certainly in the matter of the next couple of years, and I didn't hear anything from President Obama that could indicate really otherwise. You know, he made some legitimate points that he made about U.S. criticizing of Israel. Of course, that has to then work both ways, in which Prime Minister Netanyahu has to feel free to criticize President Obama, as he has, for example, over the Iran controversy, and that's not been well accepted in the White House. Really, to me, my mind, President Obama's comments were directed not toward Israel, but really towards his American Jewish supporters, the 70% that voted for him and vote for the Democrats, shoring them up while he tries to pass this or get through this Iran agreement, and also keeping in mind to the 2016 election, making comments to that sort of a liberal American Jewish base that's always voted the Democratic, and I'm sure he's hearing it from members of his own party, if not directly from Hillary Clinton, who's running to basically replace him now, but also from senators and congressmen that are going to have to be. And I think that's really where his comments were directed. And to me, it only really sounded like we're more of the same in terms of the tense relationship between him and Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Okay, let's talk about another domestic issue, and it's been a little while since you and I have been able to discuss any sort of activity by a finance minister. It was Yair Lapid. Of course, now we have Moshe Kahlon. Do you think that he will be able to take action now as the finance minister to solve some of these incredible problems that this country faces where so many others have tried and failed?
First of all, the answer, if you're saying some, I would say yes. I mean, even Yair Lapid was able to advance and make progress on some issues. Big issue is, of course, housing. I think he will, that Moshe Kahlon perhaps will be able to take, because of the powers he's been given over the Israel Land Authority and other bodies, to try to shorten the amount of time it takes to build housing in this country and make it more available. So over the long term, just like Yair Lapid, there'll be steps that will be helpful. Over the short term, he's going to have problems on some issues. For example, it was leaked this week that one of his proposals is to freeze rents for a 3 to 5 year period, meaning anybody who owns an apartment and rents it out is not going to be able to raise rents during that time. You know, the idea is, of course, to help people who have to pay rent and are facing it. But a lot of Israelis own, second apartments, third apartments, rent them out and depend on that income. Some middle class Israelis. There's going to be a lot of resistance to for this and some of the other proposals we've heard talk about of inheritance tax introducing. I think that's going to be kind of unpopular. I mentioned the whole incident with the communications ministry, where Prime Minister Netanyahu dismissed this director general who wanted to do reforms in the area of broadband internet, and of course that's relates to what we call recusio, concentration of big monopolies, which Kahlon wants to try to promote. So he's going to find some resistance in this government, and we're going to have to see. I think also he's going to be in for a big learning curve as the foreign minister now.
We'll have you back often to discuss how it's going. Kalev Ben David, always good to have you with us.
Thank you, Aaron. Shabbat Shalom to you, and Shavua Tov to all the viewers.
In other news, Prime Minister Netanyahu has appointed Eli Groner as Director General of his office. The 44-year-old American-born Groner previously served as economic attaché to Washington, where he was responsible for promoting national interests with the U.S. Treasury and other American governmental agencies. He was also once the financial reporter right here at IBA News, as well as the Jerusalem Post. Netanyahu cited Groner's rich experience in both the public and private sectors for having selected him, and expressed his confidence that his new Director General will succeed in advancing the nation's economy. Groner is the father of 5 and lives in Gush Etzion. In local crime news, underworld kingpin Rico Shirazi has been arrested in connection to the investigation codenamed 512 into organized crime. Shirazi was detained for his alleged involvement in the 2003 murder of Gal Yechaskel and the attempted murder of the head of a rival mob family, Asi Abutbol, who's currently serving a term in prison. Shirazi has also been charged with committing a series of drug-related offenses, and his remand has been extended by 14 days. Police have so far arrested 60 people related to the investigation, several of whom have now turned state witness. The head of the Samara Regional Council, Gershon Masika, has temporarily stepped down from his post after cooperating in a high-level corruption scandal allegedly involving several senior officials, including former Israel Beitenu Knesset member Faina Kirschenbaum. Masika signed a deal to become a state witness and has provided authorities with information about funds that were illegally transferred to the suspects as bribes. They're also believed to have funneled the public funds to local organizations and other groups in exchange for kickbacks. As part of the deal, Masika will not face prison time, and the charges against him will be significantly reduced. 3 IDF soldiers from the Hatzerim Air Force Base have been indicted for allegedly committing a series of sexual offenses. The charges include rape, sodomy, and invasion of privacy that occurred when one of the troops is believed to have attacked a female soldier as his 2 friends watched, with a third raping the victim a short time later. One of the accused reportedly filmed the entire assault on his cell phone. Investigators say that they believe that the soldiers also coordinated their testimony in an attempt to obstruct their prosecution. In regional news, Islamic State forces are continuing their advances and have now seized the last border crossing with Iraq after withdrawal of Syrian government troops. This latest victory comes as the group tightens its grip on the historic Syrian city of Palmyra and overrun Iraqi defenses east of the provincial capital of Ramadi. The radical extremists now control more than half of all Syrian territory, strengthening doubt in the American strategy of relying almost exclusively on airstrikes to combat them. Washington is sending an expedited shipment of 2,000 lightweight, shoulder-fired weapons that should arrive in Iraq as early as next week. The arms are part of the equipment that the Americans agreed to supply when Iraqi Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi visited Washington in April to plead for greater help in fighting the extremists. According to a spokesman from the Pentagon, the latest shipment of weapons isn't being sent in response to the fall of Ramadi, but was prompted by White House consideration of additional ways to strengthen support for Iraq and help its armed forces to stop ISIS' increasingly effective use of car bombs. The holiday of Shavuot begins at sundown tomorrow and commemorates the anniversary of God's giving the Torah to the entire nation of Israel assembled at Mount Sinai. McGill University professor Gil Troy told IBA's Ellie Wogelenter that the celebration of the festival shows how non-observant Jewish citizens in the country are actually more religiously aware than they think they are.
Shavuot is probably the most important holiday that is most overlooked in the American Jewish calendar. Most American Jews that I know will not be celebrating Shavuot. And by contrast, almost every single Israeli Jew and Israeli Arab that I know will be at least celebrating Shavuot by taking time off. But more deeply, what we really see is that because most Israeli Jews will be eating blintzes and having cheesecake and somehow doing the dairy thing and acknowledging that this is the holiday where we got the Torah, we see that many Israelis who come to me and say, Ani chiloni, I am secular, actually have no idea what truly secular means and don't realize how deeply religious they are. And that's actually one of the beauties of living in a Jewish state where we have this national religious dimension and we also have the power of our religious heritage even when we think we're secular.
So what is the heritage message that's being given over on this holiday?
Shavuot is both a great national moment and a religious moment. It's a moment where we do indeed get the Torah, which is a moment of religious revelation, but it's also a moment where the nation comes together. In some ways, the nation, which has kind of been born again in Yetziat Mitzrayim and leaving Egypt, is now getting, and having, let's say, it's created its hardware, is now getting its software, getting its ideals, getting its values. And a nation has to have both a sense of blood, commitment, but it also has to have a story, it has to have values, it has to have some content to it. And Shavuot celebrates that content. So wherever you stand on the Jewish spectrum, from left to right, religiously or politically, you should be celebrating Shavuot as an incredibly important holiday because it's the holiday of our teaching, our learning, our values, our story.
So what are some of the core issues that this holiday teaches us?
Well, just as Shavuot teaches me that there's a false choice all too often between national and religious, one of the things that Shavuot also reinforces for me is that we're often caught in a false choice between Jewish and democratic. Where did democracy come from? It came from the Bible. It comes from the Torah. It comes from the ideas of every human being having individual dignity and individual rights and individual destiny. It comes from proclaim liberty throughout the land. So for me, Shavuot is not just a Jewish holiday, it's also a democratic holiday. And when we talk about what's going on right here in Israel, when we talk about how to create a Jewish democratic state, we shouldn't always see them as in conflict. We shouldn't always see them as contradictory. Go back to the Torah and see that Judaism gave birth to democracy. And so, yes, there are sometimes moments of tension, but there are also great moments of overlap.
But there are issues that are not just in conflict, but diametrically opposed positions. How do you square that?
Look, this week, Rabbi Lau did say that he wants to look over every piece of legislation and see whether it's kosher according to him. And we do have a problem in this Jewish democratic state where we have democratically allowed too many ultra-Orthodox to use their democratic rights to hold us hostage. We have democratically allowed a religious ministry to come and distort what I think should be happening in terms of civil rights and civil marriage and all kinds of things. But, so I do see the points of tension, but I also think that it would be a more helpful conversation if, while pointing out the moments of tension, we also showed the moments of overlap. We also showed the degree to which democracy comes from Judaism, and therefore we don't see every Jewish democratic issue as one of a massive existential clash, and we actually see that deeply Jewish people, deeply religious people, deeply national people who are connected to Judaism and Zionism are also deeply democratic.
In financial news, the shekel today ended the trading week by strengthening against all major foreign currencies and due to the closure of the stock market on Fridays. Here's a look at the closing numbers for the week. Turning to the weather, and we can expect another beautiful spring day tomorrow with slightly warmer, more seasonal temperatures and clear skies. You're looking at the forecast at home and abroad for the next 24 hours. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. I'll be back at this desk tomorrow. Hope to see you again then. I'm Erin Viner, wishing you a wonderful evening and Shabbat Shalom from Jerusalem.